Today, we are digging deep into the sands of ancient Mesopotamia. We're going to uncover the story of a people who literally vanished from history for thousands of years, only to reappear and challenge everything we thought we knew about where we come from. We're talking about the Sumerians.
But, this isn't just a history lesson. This is an exploration of two totally different ways of looking at their story. One is a tale of incredible human genius. The other, well, it's a story of a cosmic intervention. So which one is it? Let's dive in and find out.
So let's go back, not 5,000 years ago, but to the 19th century. Picture the huge, wind-swept deserts of modern-day Iraq. For millennia, the only hints of what happened here were stories in the Bible. But something else was sleeping just beneath the surface.
Archaeologists started digging up these bizarre clay tablets covered in strange, wedge-shaped marks, and nobody could read them. It wasn't Egyptian, it wasn't Greek, it was something else, something much, much older. Cracking this code, which we now call cuneiform, basically gave birth to a whole new field of study, Sumerology.
And what they discovered was just astounding. A whole civilization that seemed to pop up out of nowhere, fully formed, the Sumerians. These people built the world's first real cities, with enormous temples and lavish royal tombs. They had kings, they had laws, complex economies, and then poof, they were gone. Their language was forgotten, their cities were buried, until they became nothing more than ghosts living in clay.
So how in the world did these ghosts leave us such an incredibly detailed record of their lives? Well, it all comes down to their single greatest invention. And you might be surprised to learn it wasn't born from a desire for poetry or philosophy. Nope, it was born from something way more practical. Can you believe it? Writing was invented for accounting. The temples in cities like Uruk were basically giant economic centers. The priests had to keep track of who brought in grain, who was owed what, how much beer was in storage. Human memory alone just couldn't handle it. So they started with simple pictures, which then evolved into abstract symbols that stood for sounds. And just like that, for the very first time in human history, our thoughts could be made permanent.
And they picked the absolute perfect medium. Paper and papyrus are so fragile, they just fall apart. But baked clay? It's unbelievably tough. And the great irony is that the very fires that destroyed their cities are what baked their records solid, preserving their voices for us to hear thousands of years later.
And those voices are telling us stories that are over 4,000 years old. It's like having a window into a world that's almost alien. It's so ancient.
So, what was their world actually like? What did they believe? Well, for the Sumerians, life was pretty much a cycle of backbreaking work under a hot sun, all dictated by the whims of these powerful and, frankly, unpredictable gods. And what came after life? Yeah, it was not exactly something to look forward to. See, in their belief system, there was no pearly-gated heaven or fiery hell. Everybody, whether you were a king or a farmer, good or evil, you all went to the same place, this gloomy, silent, dusty underworld where you just kind of existed as a shadow of yourself. And that worldview made your life on Earth, right here and now, incredibly important.
And their stories totally reflect this. The famous Epic of Gilgamesh is not just some adventure story. It's this deep look at what it means to be mortal. And then you have other stories that, well, they might start to sound a little familiar, like a great flood that wipes out all of humanity, except for one guy who's warned by a god to build a massive boat. Or a goddess who goes down into the underworld, dies, and is reborn, just like the seasons. These myths really set the stage for countless stories that came later, but this is where the mainstream story ends, and a much, much stranger one begins.
Okay, so this is where we take a really sharp turn, because there is a whole other way to read these ancient tablets, an interpretation made famous by writers like Zechariah Sitchin, and it suggests that the Sumerians weren't just writing about gods, they were writing about their actual history.
The Sumerians constantly, and I mean constantly, describe their deities as beings who came from the heavens. Now, the standard historical view says, okay, that's a metaphor. But the Anunnaki hypothesis asks a really provocative question. What if they meant it literally?
The word they used for their most powerful gods was Anunnaki. And according to this alternative theory, the translation of that word is everything. It means those who from heaven to earth came, not gods in a spiritual sense, but powerful, technologically advanced visitors from another planet.
So what's the story here?
Well, according to this interpretation, the Anunnaki came from a planet called Nibiru, which has this huge elliptical orbit, and their world was dying. They were facing a massive environmental crisis. Their atmosphere was literally eroding away, exposing them to lethal radiation from space.
Their scientists figured out one possible solution. They needed to suspend microscopic particles of gold in their upper atmosphere to act as a shield. And they knew of one place in the solar system that had plenty of gold: Earth.
So they came here. And if you read the text this way, they lay out a crazy detailed history. The first expeditions, led by a scientist named Enki, set up a base in what's now Southeast Africa to mine gold. But the work was brutal. After thousands of years toiling in the mines, the rank-and-file Anunnaki workers staged a mutiny. They refused to work. So, to solve this labor shortage, Enki proposed a radical solution: use their advanced knowledge of genetics to upgrade a native creature on Earth, an early hominid, to create a primitive worker smart enough to follow commands. This new being, they called it the Lulu. We call it Homo sapiens.
Now remember that flood myth we talked about? This is where the two interpretations collide in the most incredible way. See, both sides agree a massive, world-ending flood happened, but they have completely different explanations for the why and the how.
Let's just put them side by side. In the mythological version, the flood is an act of divine punishment. The gods are just annoyed with how loud humans are. But in the Anunnaki version, it's a totally predictable natural disaster. The Anunnaki scientists knew that Nibiru's next flyby would have a gravitational pull so strong it would cause the Antarctic ice sheet to slide into the ocean, creating a gigantic tsunami. The Anunnaki leadership basically decided, let's just let our human workers get wiped out. But Enki, who'd grown fond of his creation, secretly went against orders. He warned a human, Zuzudra, who you might know better as Noah, and gave him the plans to build a submersible boat to survive the wave.
So, whether you see the Sumerians as brilliant innovators or as the inheritors of cosmic knowledge, their impact is just undeniable. Their legacy echoes down through thousands of years, and it's embedded in the very structure of the world we live in today.
I mean, really think about your daily life. Ever wonder why there are 60 seconds in a minute or 60 minutes in an hour? Or why a circle has 360 degrees? That's the Sumerians. That's their base 60 counting system. Our idea of written laws, the zodiac, epic adventure stories. So much of the fundamental software that our civilization runs on can be traced right back to those ancient clay tablets.
And that leaves us with this incredible split. Are we looking at the records of an astonishingly creative people who figured all this stuff out on their own, using the metaphor of gods to explain the powerful forces of nature? Or are we reading the eyewitness accounts of early humans trying to describe advanced technology and beings from the sky, using the only language they had, the language of divinity?
The clay tablets themselves don't give us the answer. They just tell their story. So, were they the architects of our world? Or were they just the keepers of a lost chapter in a much, much bigger cosmic story? The Sumerians force us to ask these massive questions about who we are and where we really come from. And the final answer, well, it's still out there, buried in the dust, waiting to be understood.